Hello, welcome to Books on the World, a production of the Cape Cod Writers Center. Books on the World is the country's longest running cable TV book program, now in its 43rd year. I'm your host, Judith Bartolo, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing the three editors of the book. And the book is From the Farther Shore, Discovering Cape Cod and the Islands Through Poetry. Alice Kachemba, Robin Smith-Johnson, and Rich Humans. So I was hoping that you would tell us about your backgrounds and how this collaboration came to be. Alice, do you want to start?
Well, that would be delightful. I'm sure my other editors will edit appropriately. I am the founding director of Calliope Poetry, which started a monthly series at the West Falmouth Library in 2008, and then it added a series of workshops to help writers refine their craft. And through that, I met both Rich and Robin. Rich had moved up from New Jersey and was getting to know poets, and he offered to help, which, as any poetry organizer knows, that is like an immediate yes, because there was a lot of setup to do. So in the course of getting to know Rich, he had told me that he had co-edited a poetry anthology based on the Jersey Shore, and asked if I would be interested in coordinating a project. And of course I said, sure, like how hard is that? All these years later, I now know that it's still a yes to do this project. And through Steeple Street Poets, I know Robin Smith-Johnson very well. She had read at Calliope, and I had gone to Steeple Street from time to time. And Rich and I thought, it would be wonderful to have a third editor. And Robin she's both a very skilled poet, researcher, editor, and she's also a native Cape Codder. So this team seemed to be a dream team. And together we approached Lauren Walk at the Cultural Center for Bass River Press, a regional press, to do the book.
Okay, good. Robin, do you want to tell us about yourself?
I was thrilled when Alice and Rich approached me to be a co-editor on this anthology. I love Cape Cod. I worked for many years at the Cape Cod Times as their newsroom librarian. And also I have been a poet, published 2 books of poetry, so that when I came to the project, I was not only editing or helping to edit the book, but also I did the notes at the back of the book. So we had gone through and decided on, Rich mostly spearheaded this, what were the keystone parts of the Cape that we needed to focus on in terms of giving additional notes. So we were a year later in publishing because of the pandemic, but it gave us more time to fine tune the poems that we were going to include, as well as for me to finish up the notes, which was time consuming, but really rewarding. It was great.
Okay. And Rich, how about you?
Well, as Alice said, I'd been living in New Jersey before coming up here, been up on the Cape since '96. And I well remember asking Alice to help at Calliope. I think it took about 10 seconds for the yes to come back to me in my email. But we had connected through that. And when I was in New Jersey, I had actually done a similar anthology about the Jersey Shore, where I had lived for a number of years. And what that book had done was something similar, where we took along the Jersey Shore. It's like 127 miles, I think, along the stretch of New Jersey, and we did like a little tour going from the tip of it up the Sandy Hook down to Cape May, and in getting to know the Alice and some of the other poets up here. I had asked her about the anthology because I thought this would be a great place. I mean, there had been other books that had been, obviously a lot has been written about Cape Cod, but and there have been some poetry anthologies, but nothing quite like that. So that's where the idea came from. Alice said, sure. We were very glad to bring Robin in. I think Robin is the only true native here. Both Alice and I are sort of washer shores to Cape Cod. But I think that the three of us, it was a nice melding of all of our talents.
Right. So I'm wondering, how did you go about uh, receiving poetry for this book?
I think the first thing we did, I think Robin had alluded to it. Um, we did sort of sheets. We listed as many things as we would like to see before we went out and started soliciting poems, because we wanted to present. We didn't just want an anthology that was, the best poetry about Cape Cod or famous poets who have written about Cape Cod. We wanted something that the poems themselves sort of build upon one another and really touched and brought out both well-known and little-known aspects. We looked at historical moments, famous visitors, some of the old industries like glassmaking in Sandwich, some of the more traditional industries, commercial fishing, clamming, cranberry growing, etc. So we really, we came up with dozens of topics, and we knew
Right.
we couldn't reach all of them, but we wanted to be able to make sure. So then
Mhm.
we reached out through, through the contacts that we had here, and also took out ads in Poets and Writers through the associated writing programs. And we got over 1,000 submissions from all over the country. I mean, people love Cape Cod, and you could see that in what was sent in.
And how many did you end up with?
We ended up with 118 poems,
Oh my
and
goodness.
there were some wonderful poems that would have fit the book. But if we had many on a certain topic, we didn't want the book to be overly saturated with Provincetown, for example. We wanted to make sure we got the diversity of the landscape and the historic aspects and the diversity of the people in the industries. So um, Robin, Rich, and I met weekly for months to really go over um, poems that we we thought could actually be edited to really get into the book, which Rich and Robin and I did together. And so we had a balance between people who we didn't know and people who we knew very well. But it wasn't about residing on the Cape. It was about really bringing the place to life through poetry.
Right.
I
And
think
so
altogether we had about a thousand poems to go through.
that's incredible. Did you agree pretty much, or did you have disagreements about what should be in and not?
I would say we pretty much agreed. I mean, what Rich said earlier, that we knew there were certain poems we wanted. There were some beautiful poems that would have a tagline like walking such and so beach, but you realize that it was more about the interior landscape of almost like a meditation. And it didn't specifically have to be that particular beach or forest. So some of them were beautifully written, but they really didn't measure up to capturing the spirit of the place.
Mhm.
So I would say we had some friendly disagreements, but mostly, we knew ahead of time that there were certain poems we're looking for, and also this is more a narrative um, poetry. So there were certain other ways of writing poetry that just didn't fit the style of the book.
Mhm. Um, did you have to reach out to get poems to fill in some of the places that you didn't have?
Yes, we had a few poems. For example, my poem Bird Carver, which is about the decoy maker Elmer Kroll, I wrote for the anthology, and Rich and Alice both have poems that they were writing specifically for the anthology. We reached out to Deirdre Callahan for an Edward Gorey poem, and to Diane Hanna for a poem about the Brewster General Store. And there may have been others, but.
Oh, great. I was also curious, how did you decide what notes you were going to write about the different poems? Did you really think that certain ones needed it more than others?
Well, I
There were
think that
definitely
Rich really was you were the one who kind of made up the list, I think.
we did it. Yeah, I did an initial list. Some of it, like you said, there's some that just having that background really informed the poem. And it's not that you needed it to understand it, but it made it a richer experience.
Right.
And really, as we were going through it, just the things that we thought, what would we want to know more about? Because we want this book really to explore the Cape, and that's where the notes could come into it. And Robin did the notes, and she did an excellent job of researching it and bringing more of the Cape and really getting behind the scenes.
Yeah, that's so great. Um, do you want to read one of the poems for us? As a matter of transparency, I happen to have a poem in the book. So I have read certain ones, and I love the one by Stanley Kunin, and I love the one by Mary Oliver in particular. And they're the bookends to the book. So I was wondering if maybe one of you would like to read each of
Sure.
those.
Why don't I start with Stanley Kunin, since he's the
Okay.
first one here in the book. So, I mean, Stanley, obviously, in addition to being poet laureate and just an amazing poet, was a fixture in Provincetown for so long, one of the founders of the Fine Arts Work Center. I think he was known as much for his garden sometimes as he was for his poetry. But
Yes.
he wrote some wonderful poems. And this one, which is why we had a section of the book coming to the Cape, to start off to the Cape. And this is why this is the first one, because it's an experience coming to the Cape as much as living on here sometimes. And it's called Route 6. The city squats on my back. I am heart sore, stiff-necked, exasperated. That's why I slam the door. That's why I tell you now. In every house of marriage, there's room for an interpreter. Let's jump into the car, honey, and head straight for the Cape, where the cock on our housetop crows that the weather's fair, and my garden waits for me to coax it into bloom. As for those passions left that flare past understanding, like bundles of dead letters out of our previous lives that amaze us with their fevers, we can stow them in the rear along the ziggurats of luggage. And Celia, our transcendental cat, past mistress of all languages, including Hottentot and silence, will drive nonstop till dawn. And if I grow sleepy at the wheel, you'll keep me awake by singing in your bravura, Chicago-style, Ruth Etting smoky song, Love Me or Leave Me, belting out the choices. Light glazes the eastern sky over Buzzards Bay. Celia gyrates upward like a performing seal, her glistening nostrils a quiver to sniff the brine-spiked air. The last stretch toward home. 20 summers roll by.
So beautiful. Thank you so much. Can you name some of the other poets that people might be familiar with?
Well, certainly I would say Mary Oliver is someone people will be familiar with. Marge Piercy, Gail Mazer, Mark Doty. Let's see, Brendan Galvin, who really had 5 poems in the book, who really captures the Cape. Those poems could not be written anywhere else. And Elizabeth Bradfield, both of them are naturalists, and the way they bring the place to life is really amazing. And I would say those are the ones that probably, jump to mind. I don't know, Robin, if there are others that I overlooked.
You said that there are 118 or how many poems? So how many poets?
I think there's 78 to 80. It's one or the other, but Elizabeth Bradfield has 5 poems in the book, so does Brendan Galvin. Not everybody had that many, but we wanted to also create really, as Rich said, almost like a tapestry. There was themes that came out that I really did want us to talk about that we didn't specifically, for example, look for poems about the ecological crisis of overdevelopment and global warming and the erosion of the coastline. But we got some incredible poems from people that we really didn't know that brought this to life. And if it's all right, Judith, I'd like to read one by Mary Bergman
Oh, good.
that would capture it a little bit.
Sure.
And,
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Mary Bergman is a writer who lived in Provincetown and now lives on Nantucket. She is also a contributor to WCAI's Cape Cod Notebook. And her poem is called Disappearing Coast Guard Beach. There is no resisting the ocean, assures the narrator's measured voice in the new Park Service film. The outermost house flashes across the screen, swirling in waves. The park ranger utters a quiet, no, no, humans will adapt. Music swells and the camera pulls back, revealing our narrow ribbon of sand. And how can every beautiful and painful thing that seems to have ever happened to me be contained in this shifting place? A lot of people cry at that part, the ranger nods. And the late afternoon light of winter reeds around the salt pond glow golden. The water looks inviting. How easy it would be to slip away with the tide, to disappear. And one of the reasons why I thought of sharing this poem is, again, if you look in the back of the book, Robin's notes on Henry Beston's Outermost House, there were two poems in the book specifically on Henry Beston's Outermost House. And it gives you some background about Henry Beston and what happened to the Outermost House, which Henry Beston died in 1968. Shortly before he died, the house was listed as a literary national treasure, like a historic. Within a short time, 10 years after his death, the blizzard of 78 took the house out to sea. So that's the image that's referenced in the poem, and the notes sort of bring it more to life for people who might not have caught it. And I do think that that issue of how precious this little spit of sand really is to so many of us, and how we really need to work to protect it. That was really one of the themes that I was touched by.
Oh, yes, yes. So people not only who like poetry will enjoy the book, but history as well, the history of the Cape, it seems, that they would get a much more complete picture of what the Cape is and all that it includes. I know I certainly have learned a lot by reading some of the poems in the book. Oh, I was going to ask you about the cover. How did the cover art come to be?
Well, we were so fortunate. Lauren Wilk sent out an international call for the cover art, and Robin Rich and I were unanimous that Mary Moquin's cover art. She lives in Sandwich. She shows her work both in Barnstable and in Wellfleet. We just were so struck by the beauty of the light. It's winter light. And it to me, it also picked up a theme of Edward Hopper. So there was no two ways about it. We all said this is the cover.
Right. It's so beautiful. Where can people get the book?
Well, you can get the book in any independent bookstore, can order it directly from Ingram Spark, the printer. At the Cultural Center of Cape Cod, I would say, is the best place locally. If you go to the Cultural Center of Cape Cod's homepage, there's a Bass River Press button, and then it will take all your information. And then their volunteers have been extremely helpful in sending out the book in a timely way. And the third place, and this is, again, really close to my heart, is we've really made a point of making sure this book is in every library on the Cape and Islands. We haven't gotten into every single one yet, But I think that it's a legacy book. So this wasn't really about sales and promotion. It was really about creating a book that would last beyond our lifetimes, and that libraries were a place that we really wanted the book to be.
I have to say, it was such an honor to be chosen to have my poem in the book, knowing, how many you received and how many famous poets are in there. So I didn't know if you would want me to read mine.
Sure.
We would love that, Judith.
Yes, and especially as you find it, especially because the last section of the book is called Off Season We Live Here. And we really wanted to pick up the theme of not just the pretty postcard images of the Cape, but the real Cape.
Right. Yeah. Thanks. Cape Cod life. Cape Codders who live by the sea and look at stars, breathing salt air, painting pretty scenes of wind-blown hair, aren't the Cape Codders who sleep in cars and never see the sea for necessity of keeping themselves fed or finding their child a bed, and not enough time in the day to while away and sing of its charms as they seek any jobs to buy clothes and fuel to keep warm.
Thank you.
Edith, I think that's such an important, brave poem to show a side of Cape Cod that most people who don't live here don't realize. There is another section of people who struggle to survive.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
And Robin, it's actually a good segue if you would read your bird carver poem.
Oh,
It's
sure.
sort of like the rags to riches part of the book.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
So this poem I did write for the anthology. I've always had an interest in Elmer Kroll, and there's a little epigram at the beginning. Antique duck and goose decoys were sold for a record-breaking $1.13 million each. The decoys were made by renowned carver A. Elmer Kroll of East Harwich from the Antiques and the Arts Weekly, September 2007. He held his chisel just so, the same way he held a 12-gauge as a boy. From hunter to bird carver, the shore birds drawn to his decoys, beauties made of cedar with pine heads, his workshop a haven of precision. Canada geese with sinuous necks, the gloss of dark bogs, pintail drakes, their long gray feathers, the sheen of open wetlands, red-breasted mergansers, each long bill the shade of a marsh sunset. Hundreds of birds that he sold here and there or traded for a bucket of quahogs.
My house used to border his barn. My property went right up against his barn. And then after I moved away from there, it was taken down and put together in Harwich, I believe. Somewhere in Harwich, the Historical Society purchased it. And so his barn is here on the Cape where he did his work. But it was thrilling for me to know that such a famous bird carver was right there next to me.
That's very cool.
Yeah. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell me that you think would be interesting?
Well, I guess the only thing I wanted to do is maybe end this segment with Mary Oliver, sort of like a benediction.
Yeah.
And every reading that we've had to celebrate the book, ending it with Mary Oliver is sort of a joining moment where everybody sort of just, really gets quiet and appreciates the Cape for what it always is going to be. Right. So this is Mary Oliver's Coming Home. When we're driving in the dark on the long road to Provincetown, which lies empty for miles, when we're weary, when the buildings and the scrub pine lose their familiar look, I imagine us rising from the speeding car. I imagine us seeing everything from another place, the top of one of the pale dunes or the deep and nameless fields of the sea. And what we see is the world that cannot cherish us, but which we cherish. And what we see is our life moving like that, along the dark edges of everything, the headlights like lanterns sweeping the blackness, believing in 1,000 fragile and unprovable things, looking out for sorrow, slowing down for happiness, making all the right turns, right down to the thumping barriers to the sea, the swirling waves, the narrow streets, the houses, the past, the future, the doorway that belongs to you and me.
Oh my goodness.
Hmm.
So beautiful. Mary Oliver. Wow.
Judith,
We
you had
miss her.
mentioned, you had mentioned our names would be on here, but I guess I also just want to mention, we had done this with Bass River Press. And
Yeah.
Lauren Wolk was another name that people should know about connected with this book. She actually designed it. She was the one, she just retired from the Cultural Center, but
Yes.
she was a great partner to work with on this. Yeah, as you go through it, she really put the whole book together. She designed it, coordinated all aspects of it, including from the cover to printing. So she needs to be recognized as well.
Thank you. That is important. And it just also goes to show that it takes a lot of people to do something like this. Beautiful anthology. From the Farther Shore, Discovering Cape Cod and the Islands Through Poetry is the name of the book, edited by Alice Kachemba, Robin Smith Johnson, and Rich Yeomans. So I just want to say thank you for watching Books on the World. To view more programs like this, go to CapeCodWritersCenter.org. And thank you again for being here, and we'll look forward to readings and having people look at the book. Thanks a lot for being here.